Have you ever asked yourself how to get into the private military contracting, private security contracting industry? What certificates you need and where's the best place to get them? In that case, if you are a German speaker, subscribe to this channel right now. And if you're not a German speaker, subscribe anyway. I will be having more interviews in English in the near future. So sign up for that channel, hit the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, the guy that we're going to talk to today is George. He's a good buddy of mine. We met about 25 years ago, and he's a security industry professional, meaning he's been doing private security contracting work for a lot of years. He's been pretty much all around the world, for anything from maritime security to regular, executive protection jobs in Britain or Europe. And he's been to Madagascar and other places that are not quite that nice. So he's a guy that you may want to listen to. Now, I especially brought George on because he has a lot of trainer qualifications within the UK industry. Okay, so for the UK, there is a lot of licensing stuff that's going on. I think most of you guys have heard of the SIA license. We're going to talk about how important that license is and for who and for what areas that you might want to work in. That thing is absolutely necessary or not at all necessary, and how difficult it is to get it nowadays since we had the Brexit and all that good stuff. So I think there's something in there for you. Actually, I think there's quite a lot in there for you because I also did this video because of the many questions I get asked about, oh, what about this training provider? What about that training provider? What course should I take if you want to, become a private security contractor? And so on. And because I've been out of the business for about 10 years or so, especially the whole licensing and training course stuff, but George is right in the middle of it, and he delivers courses more or less every couple of months. He's been delivering courses in Poland with ESA or with other companies, so he has a very good inside look and perspective on the whole subject. Let's get into it. See you there. Okay, George, great to have you.
Hi, Mike.
I'm really happy that it kind of worked out on that short time frame. Are you free tomorrow? Yeah. Okay, that works.
I'm glad to be here, buddy. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh man, anytime. I'm sure I will learn a lot from you today, because we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's talk about you first so that everybody who doesn't know you, which is probably everyone besides me, gets a little bit of an idea of what you have done, what your career was so far, and why you know what you're going to be talking about, right? So,
sure.
Go ahead.
So, my name is George Bean. I'm from Ireland. I served 6 years in the Irish Defence Forces. One trip overseas to Lebanon in 1991 into 1992 with the United Nations interim forces in Lebanon. After I left the army, I moved to Germany, and actually I think the year before I moved to Germany I got introduced to you for the first time, and then we later connected through mutual friends afterwards. So that's how we know each other. And then from living in Germany for a couple of years, doing some security work, some doors, events, nightclubs, stuff like that in Germany, as well as doing just a regular day job, roofing or in construction work. We then moved back to Ireland, and got into the regular security industry just as a static guard, because my military background helped me get into security industry. And back then there was no licensing, no requirements for licenses in Ireland, which is called a Private Security Authority license, and in UK is the Security Industry Authority license for different categories. So you have static guard, door supervisor in Ireland and the UK, and then in the UK you have a SIA license for close protection, or as people in Europe are prone to say, SIA license. Yeah, I've noticed that a lot, and I'm looking at them going, what's a SIA? You know, but so I think in 2002 I moved back to Germany for a while, and I worked for a German security company there for 2 years, and then I moved to England, and that's where I found out about working in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the price of the CP courses back then was pretty heavy. It was like, I don't know, £5,000 or £6,000 about 5,000 or 6,000 euro, up to 5,000 or 6,000 pounds sterling. Could be 7,000 euro. Depends who you trained with, and obviously training with a good training provider was key to getting good work at the time. Yeah. That was 2003. I didn't go for it at the time, which I probably should have in hindsight, because I would have had a direct foot in the door with not much hassle really. But I was like, they're all mad going over there, that's not going to last long. And you know, haven't been in Lebanon and haven't been shot at, and haven't been in doing various security roles in Ireland, because in the Irish Defence Forces, a lot of people wouldn't realise this, we done a lot of escort work, or protection work if you want. It's similar to close protection, but it's not really. It's attached escorts. So we used to do cash and valuable in transit, because the Irish police were not armed. So because of the IRA, we used to have to do armed escorts of the cash vans going around to all the banks. Then we did prisoner escorts. So we'd escort dissident prisoners to and from the high courts, or to and from hospital, some of them having shrapnel in them to be removed, or other medical issues. And then we did explosive ordnance escorts, which is industrial explosives, escorting them to and from mines and depots and stuff like that, because we didn't want the IRA, INLA and other terrorist organisations getting their hands on it. So that then saw me move into, I suppose, after the army and being in Germany for a while, and then in England, I'm working in the security industry in England. I worked on a lot of doors in England and a lot of concerts and events, and I went back home and then continued to work again in Ireland in the corporate side, working for tech companies and stuff like that, just in their security teams on sites, like so blue chip companies like Tricon Technologies, or also for a newspaper and things like that, and then on the side doing concerts and events, and I would call them bodyguard jobs instead of bodyguard jobs. You know, somebody you know says, listen, can you come with me, we're escorting so and so, they're in the town visiting. I go, yeah. There was no real planning put to it, or you know, like all the stuff we learned in our CP courses and that's used in the CP industry today. There was none of that really. It was like, oh, risk assessment, what's that? You know, nobody knew, except for the people higher up, and they thought holding on to that information made them much more important than what they really were. You know, I suppose from the bodyguard jobs and the concerts and events and good quality doors, working with good crews, good teams, guys who really switched on, I carried on into my want to. I realised then, you know, I left school at 15 and a half, so I decided to go back to adult education for 2 years. I'd done a foundation program for university, and I got into Trinity College to study Germanic languages, which I then changed over to history, and not because of my German ability or anything like that. It was more to do with, I learned how to speak and read German. I couldn't write German, and they weren't teaching anybody remedial writing lessons in university at that stage, and I kind of felt frustrated about that, because I speak Hochdeutsch and Schwäbisch, more or less. Maybe not as good now as I used to. So I was I was frustrated by that. So then I transferred over to history, and I was studying history for a year. And while in that, my ex-wife kind of nagged at me to go back to work, because we wanted to get a mortgage, and we were just freshly married, about 2 years at the time. And with that, I called you, because I knew what you were doing.
I remember that.
And,
what year was that?
That was 2008. Yeah, I done my CP course.
Okay.
In July 2008, which was I think a few years after you done yours. It went to the same training provider, so Ronin Concepts with John Graham, based on your recommendation. Him and Steve Adams, or the Monster as they called him, Monster Adams, because it's the Adams family. Really,
he kind of looks the part too.
Yeah, he does, yeah. He growls as well at you, you know. But no, great bunch of guys, great training, and it was, I suppose, kind of the starting point of something to catalyst me to drive me forward into security contracting industry in general. That's basically who I am. I also have strong background in martial arts, teaching martial arts, and I'm a qualified trainer now in the security industry for both Ireland and the UK. And I was a first aid trainer as well.
That's
for
a good background. Yeah, so that's a good background, and you already spoke a couple of points that I would like to elaborate on. So when we talked before, it was usually my recommendation when people ask me used to be, well, go to Ronin Concepts UK, for example, or one of those providers in Britain, because the British have a very good network. Now the problem is, what you actually made me aware of is the issue with the SIA license. And that it's basically almost impossible for non-Brits to get the SIA license. Could you explain what happened there?
Okay, with Brexit, what happened is that unless you're a permitted resident of the United Kingdom, you cannot get an SIACP license. The only exception to that is Irish people. Me being Irish, I have an SIA license. The reason I have an SIA license is I don't need a work permit to go to work in the UK, and I can cross the border to Northern Ireland any day of the week and work there and come back. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. I can also go to London, Scotland, wherever else. So that's why we're, for now, I would say this, for now, able to apply for an SIA license. If you're a foreign national living in the UK with a residence permit, no problem, you can get a license. But if you're a foreign national who used to live in the UK but doesn't anymore, and used to have an SIA license but lives in Spain or Portugal or wherever, you're not getting the SIA license. Also, what I would say is, it used to be the case that an SIA license holder could apply for a CNAPS license in France up until Brexit. Now you can't. So there's no recognition of prior learning.
The CNAPS license is sort of the equivalent.
It's the French close protection. It's the French security industry license, or the French security regulator. So CNAPS covers close protection, static guard, doors, events, and surveillance and private investigation. So you can get a CNAPS license in various sectors. Unlike the SIA license, as I understand it, I could be wrong. The SIA license, if you have an SIACP license, you can work as a door supervisor or a static guard. With the CNAP license, you have to have the license in those specific sectors. In Ireland, for example, in Private Security Authority, if you want to work the door, you have to do a door supervisor's course. You can't use that to work as a static guard as well. Whereas in England, if you have a door supervisor's license, you can work as a static guard as well, because the door supervisor course is regarded as a higher level of content. Yeah, so it makes you competent to be able to work static guarding or manned guarding and door supervisor, but in Ireland it doesn't. Also in the UK, you have to get a special license for cash and valuables in transit. You have to do a special course for that as well. So it's complex.
Interesting. All right. With the SIA license, is that license only important if you want to work in Britain, or is it important if you want to work for a British company anywhere in the world?
I believe it's only important if you want to work in Britain, or if you're a resident in Britain working for one of the bigger companies who work overseas. The reason being is this, that when you look at the jobs back in the day when we were there, and I said 2 deployments to Iraq, minimum requirement, whatever military service, whatever level 3 FPOS or what's now called FREC or whatever, and then it would say minimum SIA level 3 close protection operations license. Yeah, and then what a lot of people never realized was that was the license, but they never listed the preferred trainers from whom they were recruiting from. Yeah, and then now that license for somebody who lives in Spain, Portugal, Germany, you done the equivalent of an SIACP course. Technically, if you went to live in the UK, you could apply for recognition of prior learning, do the upskill, get the SIA license. Bob's your uncle, you're now an SIA licensed security operative from the UK, but you have to be resident legally. Yeah.
Right.
So we've had this inquiry before from people who mind certain international footballers from Portugal, and their former they have the Portuguese license, their police special forces, former military, high level close protection operatives, government trained, can't get in the football stadium with their principal because they haven't got an SIA license, and they can't get in as security within all access areas pass.
So even like as a foreigner who has a foreign license, you can't work in the UK. Because I ask because for this reason. I think I heard that, well, maybe that was years ago, with the German 34A license, you could work in the UK for sort of up to 3 months. They would recognize that for a short while.
No, up to a week.
Not anymore?
About a week.
Up to a week? Okay. But that is still on the thing with the week.
They don't speak about this openly in the UK. Okay. Technically speaking, you're supposed to be SIA licensed. If you turn up the UK on a task and you're providing security to somebody and another security team sees you, they'll just call the police. That's what's happening with this famous Portuguese footballer's security team. Yeah. Why? Because people it's a fact of life. People are protectionist of their industry, of their sector in their nation where they're working. How many American CP teams bob all over the world and protect all the high net worth individuals working for the corporate entities, but yet they don't hire locals, or if they do, they only hire one, and he's kind of like a middleman to go between. I think security professionals across the world want to be recognised for their capabilities and capacity, and they want Europe as open as it says it is. It's very difficult to work in close protection in Europe if you're following all the rules and regulations of the last 2 to 3 years, which are coming out all over the place now, that everybody needs a license to work everywhere, which means you don't want to be handing your client off to just any old body. Yeah, especially if you're in a set team and you're the team leader or the team manager. The client's not going to be happy when he's going from Switzerland to Germany, and at the border Mike has to pick him up if he doesn't know Mike or hasn't worked with Mike before, if you get me, or she. And Mike has to hand it off then to somebody else in Holland. It becomes
and no client wants that.
No. And it's a problem in the security industry that I'm starting to recognise that there isn't a universal standard in close protection licensing in Europe, and I feel there should be. Just not Europe, but the European Economic Area, broadly speaking, going into all the new countries in Europe as well. I think there should be one course, one standard, and if you want to go work and live in another country, or just work in another country, you go do their law and legislation. You do a course on that, do an exam, you do that in your own language. You don't have to do it in their language because they're putting all these hurdles in front of everybody. So it becomes more and more difficult to work with your client internationally, and a lot of clients are going to find it difficult, and the only time they'll change all that is when people start kicking up over it and making complaints about it. And we're supposed to be living in the European Union, free flow of work and movement, totally restrictive with all the licensing systems and procedures. So I don't see why everybody should have a different system. I mean, security literally is not rocket science.
No, not quite. So we were talking about the SIA license.
Yeah.
So the SIA license is not the same as your close protection training course.
No.
One thing is that it's just the license. The other thing is the stuff that you actually learn. Now, if you want to work, let's say, for a big company, or like one of the like a correct proper company, it doesn't have to be big, yeah, but people that know what they're doing. So they will look at new guys that apply for what exactly. Well, one thing is going to be, have they done a close protection course, and if yes, what are the standards that they're looking for?
Okay, so if you look at one of the big companies working in Iraq and Afghanistan, right, they'll post a job, right, and there's still companies working in Afghanistan, by the way, just not as many, and the jobs are few and far between, but, well, I won't say that, but they're minimum jobs right now at the moment, right? So they're looking for a certain standard or quality of individual, right? So the recruitment criteria are based on the client's requirements. So let's say it's an EU mission or EU delegation, EU embassy in Kabul, right? So I think Garda World has that contract. So their recruitment criteria states all the old criteria of minimum service, close protection course, SIA, level 3 SIA close protection course or equivalent is now in the sentence. It used to be just SIA, which forced everybody across Europe to England to do an SIA CP course. Now they know that because of Brexit they can't enforce that. They have to allow for other close protection training courses. So if Sweden has its own CP course, Finland, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, God knows whatever other country has their own CP course, and it's recognised by the government, by an accredited organisation, not thrown together by George and Billy Bob, right, and putting a fake stamp on it or a fake SIA logo on it, right, with no number. You know from your search from the course we did, is it has a student number on it. That number is checkable. So all they have to do is go back to the training organisation and say, we have a guy here, as you know, people call John Graham on a regular basis of Rolling Concepts. We have a guy here says he's done your course back in 2008. Is that true? Yeah. Now, I met John last year, so John's going to remember me. And he goes, yeah, I know George. He worked with us. He's a good lad. Right? Right? Or yeah, George done our course. I wouldn't let him walk my dog across the road. You know, that kind of. So that's how the training companies or the recruiting companies check your background in terms of your certification. There was a scam for a while where people were copying other people's certificates to get jobs, especially in certain parts of Eastern Europe, right? And that got caught in Dante and got shut down very quickly, to be honest. There was a scam where people were doing courses, only half the courses, and that got shut down by the training organisations, and then that made them, the accreditation organisation, tighten up things on the training providers. I'll give you an example. I taught the last SIA CP course for ESA in Poland, and I had an external quality assurer came over from England, sitting in my pocket for 2 days. They will send people to places to watch what you're doing, to make sure you're following the timetable, and you have to be within 15 minutes to a half an hour of that timetable. So it's fairly stringent.
Well,
when you're working with the SIA, they'll climb into your pocket and live in there for a week if they have to. Metaphorically speaking,
right?
Whereby So most companies now in Europe can't teach an SIA CP course because the accreditation organisations just won't let them, won't award them the approval to do it anymore. Okay. The only way around that is for them to register their company in the UK and have an office in the UK and operate that CP course out of the UK. That means the CP course still is valid.
So it's not that hang on, just quickly. The accreditation providers won't let them have the accreditation because they are not from England.
They're not based in England.
Not because they are not giving good training.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're not
I just wanted to make that clear. Otherwise,
their company is not an English registered company or a British registered company. So again, it's a factor of Brexit.
Right.
Brexit is the main reason why all the SIA training companies in Europe stop training. They can't get the approval from the accreditation organisations. None of the accreditation organisations want to bother going outside of the UK. They're solely Ofqual, which is the regulator for training and education in the UK. Yeah. So they're solely Ofqual organisations, so they stay inside that box. What you have, for example, one of the bigger companies, actually it grew very, very fast in the UK as a training accreditation organisation, is Highfield awarding body for compliance. Highfield has two branches. It has its UK branch and it has its international branch based in Dubai. Okay, so all the courses that you would see with certain big companies based in Dubai for security guarding, for event security, for security management or supervision, for close protection, all are accredited, and their first aid training, and their health and safety, their manual handling, their risk assessments, their food safety, their food hygiene, whatever, a whole plethora of courses, right, are all accredited by Highfield awarding body for compliance international, also known as Highfield International. Yeah. And they have a level 3 international close protection officers course, which is 14 days long. It's the same course as the 2012 CP course from SIA, more or less, but it won't be, you cannot use it as recognition of prior learning when you apply for an SIA license. So that means you can go off and spend 1,800 to 2,000 euro, maybe 3 if you include food and accommodation and everything else, right, and do that course. Come away and think, yeah, I'm a qualified bodyguard. Yeah, had it recently from some people who were at ESA in Poland, done that 14-day course, and then one of the ladies who's living in Dubai, her principal is moving to the UK, and she said, does my 14-day international course allow me to apply for an SIA license? My answer was, no, you have to go and do the full new 18-day course, all of it again, which costs 3,000 euro.
Okay. I see.
The reason...
But that problem happens only when she wants to work in the UK. She could work anywhere else, just not in the UK. If
they accept the certification.
But she could work for a British company internationally.
Generally speaking, yes.
So basically, so if I understand that right, if you are not British and you don't want to work in the UK, you don't need to bother with the SIA license or with a course that allows you to apply for an SIA license should you ever live in the UK, and you could quite happily just do the Highfield Accredited International Training course and could work everywhere except for the UK like someone with a UK license.
If the employer accepts your certification.
Okay, of course, yeah. That's always the other thing.
So then the next...
In your experience...
The next part of that is there's a 10-day International Close Protection Operatives course set in the European Qualification Framework at level 5. The level 5, the European Qualification Framework is kind of weird. It's a little bit hodgepodge because in different countries the same course is listed at different levels. And the reason for that is nobody wants to give anybody direct transference of equality in outcome of qualification. So it's like if I go to Germany with all my training and qualifications and I want to get a bodyguard license, I hand it into the industry and handles camera, fully translated, notarized officially and properly, everything, they're still going to find a reason not to give me everything I want or everything I'm actually capable of doing. They're still going to find a reason that for me to do something to upskill, to boost that qualification to meet the criteria. I'll give you an example. Years ago when I lived in Germany, I had a friend of mine who's a qualified architect out of an Irish university, a listed architect in Ireland, moved to Germany and could only get a job as a draftsman. They wouldn't give him a job as an architect no matter what he done because he didn't go to university in Germany and study architecture there, which technically is against European regulations and against the law.
Yeah.
But Germany is a law unto its
But
own.
first you have to win that in court.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, that's what I mean by...
So let's get back to the... Yeah, let's get back to what you said with the... it depends on whether the employer accepts your qualification. In your experience, and you've been around the block a little bit internationally, with that internationally accredited license, how far will you get? I mean, how many, percentage-wise,
Okay.
how many employers will accept that, and how many are just strictly, oh no, I want a British license?
Let's not confuse license and certification. Okay?
Right, I'm talking about, certification.
Licenses are issued by state regulators. Well, actually, security, outside of doctors and lawyers, are the only other ones that really need a license these days, except for drivers. Think about that. So we are professionals. We have to pay a fee. We probably pay more for our licenses than doctors do. Anyway, so most companies would prefer you to have the SIACP course with a recognised trainer that they're used to, that they know the standards of which were delivered. Yeah? So you and I done Ronin Concepts.
Yeah.
Companies prefer Ronin Concepts. Or whichever other company. Yeah? They know what the standard of training is. They know who it's come from. So a lot of known knowns are better than unknown unknowns, if you get me. So Billy and Bob teaching a course down the road might not be something they're interested in. Not because of your background, not because of your experience. You could be from a mega unit. You could have multiple trips overseas, deployed into hostile environments, Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever. But part of their recruitment criteria is, if you're English, it's an English contract. It says UK citizens only. SIACP course. What they don't tell you is they have preferred trainers. So if you are from one of their preferred trainers list, they'll offer you a job. If you're not, they won't. So it's that simple.
Interesting. See, I never knew that.
So
they actually have a list. I mean, I know that.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right, you done your CP course with Ronin Concepts back in the day. You work for Sabre, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many guys did you work with there done the old Phoenix course from G4S that worked with you?
There might have been one, but I wouldn't know. I can't recall that I actually knew someone did it, but I don't.
Let me put it this way. Steve Adams, who taught us on our CP course, designed the old Phoenix course for G4S. So that's why those two courses were approved courses with the service providers. They were both SAS guys.
But what I knew was that, right, exactly, that's what I knew, and they all knew the same guys, and the companies were run by SAS people, so they knew these two guys teach our system that we're used to, so these guys can fit right into the teams. But so I thought that was more Phoenix of like because they had a personal connection.
It is, but it's also that they know that the syllabus taught on the Ronin Concepts course and the old G4S Phoenix course were the SAS CP syllabus courses.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's and it's a high standard because I have that full course. I know what it looks like. I even know what it looks like down to the advanced firearms tests. They're special forces firearms tests for the CP. Yeah, and that's the same with the Royal Military Police Close Protection Unit. Now, as a caveat to qualifications and certifications, here's the thing. If you want to get into this CP industry and you're young enough, there's nothing wrong with Feldjäger Personenschutz or Bundesgrenzschutz Personenschutz training. There are two very highly elite units in close protection within Germany. Go join. Get the training for free. Don't pay a shit ton of money like you and me did. Yeah, that's what I would say. And companies will hire you. Yeah, companies will hire you because they know your background is solid. Yeah, we had to prove ourselves, Mike, didn't we? Really, at the end of the day. So that's hard to do when you. It's easy enough if you have a military background, but it's still hard to do when you're walking in to a mixed bag of guys from different countries working together. I'm sure you're aware, and I am keenly aware, walking into a project where most of the guys are Brits and I'm Irish. They're all looking at me going, is he in the IRA? Was he in the IRA? What's his political affiliations? What's this Paddy doing here? Yeah, I'm sure the boys were going, Mike the German, what is your problem? Yeah, you know, some of course stereotypical ideas being taught, but like, who's this guy? The Germans don't have an army worth fighting. They lost the last 2 wars. Why would he be a good soldier? Do you get me? Because that's what the way the Brits think, right?
The reason, see, what I know, and then they told me that, and then I said, like, guys, you only won because you got all your friends to help you out, because we had you on the fucking ropes there in Dunkirk.
Yeah, and I say to them all the time, we kicked your ass for the last 800 years. You just didn't realise it until you lost.
See, on the other side, I always say, like, the thing with the we went for world domination twice and we failed twice, but you guys never went for it.
No,
you know. So
but we did.
We'll do it a third time. No worries.
The Irish diaspora is 400. Is something like 100 million people. There's only 6 million people on the island.
Yeah, that's because you probably breed out everywhere. You try the sneaky way.
Stop being jealous, Mike. It's not going to help you, buddy. Right? The women love Irishmen.
It's if you run into red-headed people everywhere on the world, you just know, like, how did that guy do it? Was George here before? Nah, not anymore.
My favorite chat up line is do you have any Irish in you? And the girls go, no, and I go, do you want some?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see you getting in trouble in the bars when you were younger.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I remember that.
I feel like a bloody airplane. The blue lights on my earbuds are here going doo 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 doo.
But that looks good, man. You look like a spaceman or something. Now let's go back to, you talked about the ESA course, right? The 10 days ESA course. And you compared that to a 14-day course.
It's the same course. It's basically the same course, just more compressed. So it's not with ESA. It's called a Level 5 International Close Protection Officers course, and it's awarded through Elite Academy Norwich, of which I'm an approved trainer. So through Elite Academy Norwich, I could technically deliver the SIA CP course, the 14-day international CP course, the 10-day international CP course set at level 5. So the first 2 were level 3, UK level 3, which is Europe level 5. The 10-day CP course is CP pure. There's no physical intervention, there's no conflict management, there's no stuff required for the UK license to work on doors and static guard and events. See, the new UK bodyguard course basically has 8 days of training for conflict management, physical intervention and close protection physical intervention, instituted by the regulator, the Security Industry Authority, right? And these have a mandatory minimum training time, so they take about 8 days or 6 days, I think it's 6 days of the CP course, plus a requirement of a level 3 first aid qualification, such as FREC or FPOS or first aid at work, which is also depending on which qualification you go for, 3 to 5 days of training on top of that. So you're talking 11 days training. So the old SIA CP course used to be 140 hours or 139, could be delivered in approximately 10 to 12 days, depending on how many hours a day you're working. Now it's 235 hours total qualification time and 193 hours guided learning hours or direct learning time. So there's not much you can do with, unless you're face to face with your students. There's just not much in terms of hours, like 40 hours difference that you can do online, virtually, or through a workbook or a course manual. So that's why the new course is so long. Sorry.
I see. So if we're looking at let's say German guys, right? maybe some previous military experience, but not in the CP field, so no close protection training, and they want to get into international work. So they are more into the let's go contracting in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, wherever, you know, Libya, something where like bullets fly, right? They should have, if I understand you correctly, the level 5 international CP course as a base, because without that they're probably not gonna get looked at, if I understand that.
That or the 14-day international Highfield international one. There's 4 days difference, but not much difference in terms of content or context. They're both designed for the corporate industry, which is executive protection. Neither of those courses are designed for hostile environment. And the SIA license is not designed for hostile environment. Contrary to popular belief. If you remember our course, we did an extra week of hostile environment close protection training. Supplementary to the SIA license. Yeah. So Billy and Bob can run a hostile environment course for 5 days in Prague or Poland or wherever. Yeah. So long as they're sticking to the contact drills that are going to be used by the company those guys are going to go out and work for, then it's functional. If they're going to create some fantasy role play, right, airsoft, paintball, force on force drills that have no relation to close protection, counter ambush drills, I don't know. It depends on the person who's training you and what their experience is, doesn't it? Of course.
Yeah. So this is the skill part. So what I tell people is, when you go to a course, there's 3 different courses. One course you go to get the check in the box and your certificate, which allows you to apply for a license, so to go to work. Yeah. Then there's one course that you go to get the skills that you actually need. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find a course that has both. Yeah. But usually you have to do both courses, the one for the fucking paperwork and the one then to get actually the skills. Now, let's talk about those, let's say, hostile environment courses, right? Which are basically, like we did, an add-on to the regular CP course, which is for executive protection, mainly what you learn. So how would a company that you apply for, like that wants to hire someone, how would they know if your hostile environment training was actually good or not? Is there a standard, an international standard, where you have to look for your training provider? Hey, do I get a license that says this and that, or is it just like
not really
word of mouth?
Word of mouth.
Is that a good name or not? That's how you go. If so, it's for someone who doesn't.
No, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, just quickly, for someone who doesn't know the industry, it's pretty much impossible to decide whether a training provider for hostile environment training is useful or not, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now how would you go about that? If someone asks you, like the guys that ask me always,
this is going to be another.
What kind of course should I do?
This is going to be another long answer, Mike. Okay. You and I done.
I know, that's fine.
You and I done.
That's why we're here for.
You and I done a really good CP course. We paid €5,000 or €6,000 to do a course with John Graham, right? The master, I call him, Sensei Splinter, right? Right? John took us to the relevant locations we went to. I think with us it was Prague. Okay, we went to Clean. We went on that 360 gun range. We done a week of not only planning a movement, which was like a live exercise the whole time, but also contact drill after contact drill after contact drill on the gun range, right? So basically we planned our journey there and our journey back, and we found an alternative route the next day, and each person was a different team later going to and from the range. But on the range we were doing range shit, which means we sweated, right? The guns bit us, bloody fingers everywhere, all sorts, right? So at the end of that
crashed the cars a little bit.
We were doing a baseline peel back. We were doing an Australian peel, right? And one of the lads peeled back to one of John's cars, right? And for some reason, like he shot into the bonnet of the car, just below the window. There's a metal band there. The round bounced up and out, and it's it was like a Mexican wave going through the top of his car. It's going, "Oh, shot my car!" One of the lads dropped the round into the car, and it bounced back out. Like, anyway, no, so we paid good money to go and do that, and that is an expensive enterprise in its own right, because you have to pay your flights, your food, your accommodation. The weapons have to be rented, ammunition has to be paid for based on how much you want to shoot. Can you get more ammunition? Depends on whether the guys have time or not, because based on the turnover of the drills. Yeah. You can go to places like ESA. They have a 7-day PSD course, right? It's basically the 5-day International Bodyguard Accreditation course that I can teach, with 2 days shooting built onto it. But when you look at that timetable, there's more shooting and scooting drills built into it than there is actually introduction to close protection. And by the way, that 5-day bodyguard course with the 2 days added onto it is designed as an introductory course to bodyguarding for those interested in in going ahead, right? Also for those who need some sort of certification to help them get a job doing something associated with close protection, but not exactly close protection. Yeah. Okay. So the 10-day one is a double up, basically has everything in it, and a lot of the second half of that is exercise after exercise after exercise after exercise. Because guess what? That's where you make all your mistakes. That's where you have your learning outcomes, where you where you're assessed, and you kind of get to know what the indicative content. The indicative content means the indicated content required to know, right? So you get to look at that content and put it into practice, and you learn from a true experience. And true failure is very important. You fail upwards. If you come off a course and think you're Gucci super duper bodyguard, which we're prone to feel after passing a course, yeah, and everybody goes, yeah, mad session, let's go, yeah, and we're bodyguards now, and you don't get a job for 3 years, that's some kick in the teeth really at the end of the day, because you thought after coming off the course of 18 days you're now a Super Saiyan soldier of some sort of special magnitude. You're not even an experienced bodyguard. You've passed a series of tests and assessments that say you can apply for a license to be a bodyguard, and you also have passed a series of tests and assessments that say you can now maybe work at the bottom of the ladder, which if you're lucky is an RST.
All right, so let's talk about the bottom of the ladder, because like you said, a lot of guys think that once they got their license, now they can apply, they will get a job as a PSD somewhere in a war zone, right? I remember when I first started, I was lucky. I actually did get a job like that.
Yeah, you were really lucky.
But a lot of the guys that came later, a lot of the guys that came later had to start as a static guard, right? Not in a PSD team, but working for the same company, but as a, static guard or guard manager or something like that.
Look at me
So,
look at me compared
that
to
being
you, right?
said,
Look at me compared to you for a second, right? You done your CP course about 2 years before me.
Sure.
I have 6 years military service in a very active infantry unit with a lot of escort experience. Problem: Ireland is neutral.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, right? I had never deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, so by 2008, 2009, they were looking for guys with 2 trips or 2 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah, remember we had that conversation? It was kind of like, oh shit, yeah. I then went along, and I had to find my way into a place like into Iraq or Afghanistan through the back door to get that on my CV.
Yeah.
So the things you have to do sometimes to meet the criteria might not necessarily be what you want to do in terms of security work or close protection. But if it's the bottom of the ladder and it's a foot in the door, and you can put that country's name on your CV and they know that you know what the environment is like, they're more likely to hire you.
Okay, I see. That's a good point, that you have experience in the environment and don't need a long time to like find your footing once you get into country.
Yeah. I mean, look, you look at the early days of Iraq, let's say, right? Everybody ran in there making shit tons of money. it was rock star wages, right? And everybody was running around with Gucci kit and nice cars and all that kind of stuff. You go to Iraq today, you get lucky to get 2 magazines. You know what I mean? Seriously.
Yeah.
Right? The entry level wages for working for Garda World in Iraq right now is $175 a day as a member of a CP team, which is a mixed bag because you're working with local nationals. Right? Of that, $25 is taken away from you at source for tax. So you're really making $150 a day, and you're doing a 2-month rotation, 7 days a week. 2 months on, 2 months off.
So 2 months on, 1 month off?
So 2 months on, 1 month off.
2 months on, 2 months off?
No, it could be like that. It could be 3 months on, 6 weeks off. It depends. But I think actually you're right. I think it's 8
okay,
and
so
4.
2-1 in the ratio.
Yeah, it's 2 and 1 is the ratio. But it depends who you're working for. Some companies let you stay on for 3. You know, but here's the thing. It's not good to stay past 3. My personal opinion. If you stay out overseas, deployed longer than 3 months, you're going to be burnt out, and then you're going to become a liability. So you end up with...
Yeah, my breaking point was usually around 6 weeks when I started to feel that I'm not the same as I used to be when I started, because it's just... Yeah, it wears you out.
But your adrenals are on, your endocrine system is on the go the whole time. Your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are constantly at odds with each other. So when you probably noticed this when you came off task, what happened to you? For the first week you slept. I came back, boom, I'm that cold, right? Because my endorphin system is burnt out. Yeah, because you're in the fight or flight mode. Nobody likes to hear that, but that's the truth. Yeah, is it your parasympathetic or your sympathetic nervous system that is in constant run mode while you're deployed? And sympathetic. So people don't realize this.
It's always adrenaline.
So that's why you sleep, but you don't sleep. Do you get me? You might sleep 4, 5, 6 hours, but it's a very light sleep. And then when you come off deployment, your family are always wondering what's wrong with him. He's sleeping so much, like, I just need to sleep. Leave me be. That and eating everything in sight. Yeah, biggest thing I've ever. The one thing I discover every time I come back from deployment is I spend about a week of eating steaks every day because I haven't had meat, and I love meat. I haven't had enough meat while I was away, so I just end up womping steak down sometimes twice a day. Yeah, and then that's where George gets chubby.
So you said Garda World is a massive company, so they used to pay very well because I worked for them for a long time. Yeah. When you say entry wage, what if you find a job that pays a good wage as a CP operator in a foreign country, in a hostile environment, what kind of wages can you expect nowadays? What would you say? Okay,
so if you're lucky enough to get a job with an American company, you're on your $500 a day. That's not going to change. The American companies...
Oh yeah, so that's still there.
American companies work based off that. But let's say the American company subcontracts it to Garda World. Well, Garda World is actually an American registered company. So let's say they subcontracted that to their British sister company, which is Garda World / Aegis. Yeah, Tim Spicer's company. Right. So Aegis Defence, I think they're called, right? You're on $175 a day as a new entry team member. If you go to Afghanistan, you're on a little bit more. You're on about $220 a day. Right? Now, a buddy of mine worked for a British company. I think I'm not sure whether it was Control Risks or G4S. He was doing the embassy contract. He was on £220 a day. I went to Afghanistan in 2010, and this is a side story, if you don't mind me telling it. It's kind of unique, and this is what I'm talking about, getting in the back door.
Go ahead. No.
A company advertised in my local provincial newspaper, urgently required 20 block layers, to build permanent structure in Camp Bastion, Afghanistan, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. And I seen this, and I'd work in construction, as you know, Mike. I've worked as a labourer, skilled labourer, so I called him up. I said, I can get you the block layers. And he's like, all right. Of course, a friend of mine called at the same time. Two of us had the similar idea. but he was a block layer, and I was going to call him next, right? So we pooled our resources. In the end, they didn't need 20 guys. We got 16 block layers, and we flew out to Dubai in February 2010. Spent a week in one of the hotels getting drunk every night because we were waiting to go in because the fighting season started and the guys were being a bit antsy down in Helmand province. And then about a week afterwards, we flew in from Fujairah airport on the backs of some Russian airplanes, and it was like Good Morning Vietnam. I mean, it's the first time in 20 years or so I could smoke a cigarette in a plane. And the load master was just giving us out coffee, you know, and we were sitting, we weren't even strapped in when we were taking off. This was a big cargo plane. We were sitting on boxes, for 8 hours from Fujairah in UAE to Helmand province, Camp Bastion in Helmand province. And what we did was we built the first 2 permanent structures there, right? So getting off the plane, we walked down onto the runway, and you see all the boys flying off, going off to do their thing, right? And myself and a buddy of mine had been in the army, and he goes, I love this. And I went, man, civvies paid for this shit. We're getting paid to do it. Right? So we were just laying blocks, right? We were just laying blocks beside the runway. And every day we saw them bring in talibs and prisoners and stuff. But that aside, I spent 6 weeks there, right? And I earned, I think it was $30 an hour, which was more than most CP guys were making on the ground per day. Yeah. So most of the guys I knew from my CP course were working in Kabul were on £220 a day. Yeah. I came out of there into Dubai, got paid cash, flew home.
Nice.
Yeah. And that's how I got Afghanistan on my passport. and I screeded riverbed sand, you know, on one of those shakers. I screeded 60 tons of riverbed sand myself and six or seven Nepalese fellas doing this for hours every day. We 60 tons of sand, and we built the first 2 permanent structures in Camp Bastion. That's my claim to fame. just to get Afghanistan.
That was your first contract in Afghanistan.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I was offered a job as a close protection officer, convoy security guy, with a company called Compass, because they had the security of our company, right, that we were working for, and the guy who was running it was a former South African recce. And this is in 2010, and the money he offered me was $3,500 a month. And I was like, I went.
Yeah, he probably bagged another.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, buddy, sorry, no, I can't do that. I can make that in Tesco stacking shelves. You know, for the time, discomfort, and everything else. Anybody who's getting into this industry, I'm not trying to put people off. I think it's a great industry if you can get into it, and if you can make connections, great. But what I would say is think about how everything works. You know, ask people who've worked in the industry and see where they are. I mean, right now, for example, I know of a contract where guys are going in as, and experienced guys are going in as security guards on embassy contracts in Libya. Yeah, I know because I've helped a few guys get a job on that contract. Yeah, I know what they're getting, and I know what they can expect, and I know what the CP teams are getting, and I know what they can expect because they're protecting the EU delegation. Yeah, what I can say is the days of rockstar wages are long gone. Yeah, and that you have to manage your expectations of what you think you deserve might not be what they want to pay. And then the other side is the executive side of things, the high net worth individual thing, the not so exciting Gucci jobs in the sandpit, in inverted commas. Yeah, they pay more these days.
Yeah,
and you're
it's
in
true.
the industry to protect people, but you're doing it for your future, to pay for you and your family and everybody else. It's okay when you're single like we were back in the day. It's not a problem. It's when you start to settle down as you get older, then it is a problem. And you have to look at what the general indoors, or the long-haired general as we call her in Ireland, says. Because she's the boss.
So, since like that's a good point that you were talking about. It's if you do it, you can't really do it for the money anyway. So you should do it because you really love the adventure. You love working with the same kind of guys. You love working in a team.
Put it like
all
this, Mike.
Stuff, right?
It's like wanting to be a priest. It has to be a vocation.
Yeah, right.
It has to be a vocation.
But you told me a little bit about your job in Madagascar.
Oh yeah.
Which was, I don't know how well paid it was, but it was probably quite exciting.
$500 a day.
Do you want to share that one?
Start off with the pay.
So it was well paid as well.
It was the highest paying job I've ever had. Right, I went down in terms of close protection. Now I'd done maritime security as well for 5 years straight, and I was the in-house trainer for the maritime security company I worked at. Right, so I trained myself out of a job because I trained all the team members and all the team leaders. And as soon as they became good, they didn't need me anymore because I knew how good they were. They were better than me, because I trained people to be better than me. That's my motto, right? Anyway, Madagascar.
That's good. That's how it should be.
Exactly. Madagascar. That was a really interesting contract because I don't want to give away names of companies or stuff like that. The NDAs are long gone, but I'll certainly talk about circumstances. Right, we were working for. I was called. Well, I seen an advert on one of the Facebook pages to which I'm connected through a buddy of mine. He sent it to me then. He says you should apply for this because they're looking for a French speaker, because I also speak French. So I would say at my time living in Germany, you could probably give a good estimation. My German was pretty good for an Anglophone, right? So I was around C2.
Yeah.
And my French is about B2, right? So I got a job. I applied for the job. I got the offer of the job because it was Christmas. Christmas time is when the door is open.
Because no one else wanted it.
So you got to be able to sacrifice to get what you want, right? So I took the job. I went in November and it was for 2 weeks. Turned into 3 months. Okay? Anyway, so my principal was the local director general of, or director general or managing director of the company, the local national managing director. Obviously there is a international managing director with the mining company. So my first assessment was straight after my interview. They sent me a descriptor of a task and said, write this out. So I had to do a whole task plan without even being on the ground, right? Do a route selection, route recce, and kind of time it out and make recommendations. So I used the mnemonic IMRAC, which is information, intention, method, risk, administration, communications, right? And I built my whole profile around that and sent it away. It was like 15 pages, which was, much more than they expected. And I made my recommendations. The descriptor was, your principal is a self-driver. He will not accept a replacement driver. He is the only one who will drive. First time in my life I ever done a task where my principal was a self-driver. So I done the risk assessment anyway, made my recommendations. As you know, that's all you can do. The principal is still going to do what they want to do, right? More or less, right? So if you think of Madagascar as a cross between a hostile environment or a cross between a permissive environment and a semi-permissive environment. So a bit like your adventures in Chad, right? And it's very much Afrocentric. But there is, because Madagascar is where it is geographically, a lot of the population are mixed race because they had over thousands of years, like they're generic to that island, but they had people come from Indonesia and Malaysia as their original settlers. Then people from the Mozambique, the Bantu, come in, and that's where the Afrocentrism comes from. Then they were invaded by France, taken over by France. So that's why everybody speaks French and French Creole, or their version of French Creole. So it's a whole hodgepodge. Very lovely place. People are lovely for the greater part of things. One of the biggest industries in Madagascar is cattle rustling. Believe it or not, they're very cattle orientated. It's a symbol of status in tribes. So people steal each other's cattle, and it's about a 40 million euro industry in Madagascar. And people don't realise the population of Madagascar is 25 million people. right? So when I went down there, I went into my principal. He's the same age as me. He grew up on the side of a road in a stick hut. He showed me actually on my first trip down, this is where I grew up. And it was just a patch of grass. We had our hut here. Well, he ended up in Harvard. Do you know what I mean? Just goes to show you can go from growing up on the side of the road to Harvard in business management in the space of 49 years or whatever, and he's the local managing director of this company. So he had a threat from a local politician who was against the mining operation in the area he was in. Why? Because that local politician was used by other nations who wanted the rights to that mine, and the other nations are Russia. Yeah. So I had surveillance from local operatives hired by them. I also had the Russians watching me. You'll pick a Russian out a mile away because of their clothes. It's just a different way to dress.
Oh yeah.
Also how they move and how they talk. And my ex-wife is from Crimea, so I speak a bit of Russian. I understand a lot more. And I can get by with pretending to be one if I have to, because my accent is pretty good when I do speak. And actually, apparently, I'm told that I'm fluent when I'm drunk.
That seems to help always.
It does, doesn't it? Anyway, so we were minding our principal, and a lot of the times we were going to meetings and what we call public consultations with the general public of the community where the mining operations is taking place, and you're explaining to them, well, your principal is explaining to them what the company is going to give to the community, etc. You know, and this particular company was really good at investing in the community and in training of the local people and ensuring that there's longevity to their presence, and there's longevity to jobs, and that there's a level of education and stuff. So for me, not only was this like a well-paid job, but it was also a job that I had a lot of pride in, because it was something that you rarely see with mining companies. They weren't, mining companies just go in and strip everything and go. This company was going in and it was contributing, and it was staying, because what they were mining is available for the next 40 to 80 years. So we're talking about creating generational education system, a generational employment, and maybe generational wealth in the locality. And some people just wanted to go in and take all that, and to my mind, the Russians, they would love to. They would have loved to have that access, the access to that resource. So the threat was on our principal. Was from the time it was made, this politician said he's going to kill him. So obviously, the threat was imminent, but I ended up being the only expat CPO there, and I was the agent in charge. A guy was there before me for a couple of weeks. He parachuted in, you know yourself, fastball, I need you here now. Okay, get on the plane, go, right? And I was brought in 2 weeks later, and I took over. And then I wrote up all the SOPs for the residential security team, the SOPs for the manned guarding team controlling the gate, the SOPs for the security team at the office, the SOPs for the security team at the other office, doing full risk assessments and venue assessments as I went along, because I never had time to take time out to go to A or B. It was just like, if we went to a restaurant, I would get out, boss, I just need to take a few photographs, boom, take my photographs, right, make some notes, and when I got back at night time at 8 o'clock in the evening, I would start doing my venue risk assessment of that venue, because I knew I would have to go there again at some stage. And that's how I created my portfolio of documents and risk assessments of going. What I did was, not your standard long risk assessment. I did a no go assessment. 3-page document, pictures, routes, GPS coordinates, names of managers and phone numbers, and that was it. Right. So is it a go or no go area? It's a go area, or depending on where it was and who ran it, we would decide whether it was go or no go. And it was down to the principal. Actually, he helped me a lot, because obviously he speaks Malagasy, he knows the restaurant, he knows the people who own it. I said, will you be going there again? Yes, I will. Then it's a go. Will you be going there again? No. Why? Well, I don't like them, and they're with the opposition, so we're not going there again. It's a bit dodgy. Okay, fair enough, that's a no-go. There's a very simple way to assess these things sometimes, is whether the principal wants to go there or not.
Yeah.
So then I had 6 Malagasy gendarmerie working for me, 2 at the residence of the principal's parents who lived in the south of the country, and because he was under threat, they were under threat. Obviously older and vulnerable people. So he had 2 gendarmerie protecting his mother and father at their house. And he had 2 regular gendarmerie and 2 guys from the Force d'Intervention de Gendarmerie Nationale, which is like the Malagasy version of GIGN, yeah, Groupe d'Intervention de Gendarmerie Nationale. It's a bit like, I don't know, I suppose GSG9, yeah. And I had these guys working with me, and they were great guys, but standards vary, as we know, globally, in terms of training and education and development.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of work with them and upskill them as I went along, which was also part of the reason I became a trainer, because I found that it doesn't matter where you are, somebody always needs to learn something. Yeah. And being an individual, even if you're on operation, and being an individual has those qualifications to deliver that training, can be a bonus asset to your company. Yeah. And they go, well, you're a qualified trainer, you deliver that training. Okay, cool, no problem. Then they're covered by insurance. If you just deliver the training and you have no education and training qualification to deliver any sort of training whatsoever, your training is not covered by insurance, and if they get sued, they're like Jesus on the cross. Yeah. So that's the reason why courses exist. Certification is important, because if you don't have certification for your from your operatives, the operation is not insured. Yeah. Give you an example. Happened here recently in Ireland. You know the band the Eagles? Hotel California?
Yes.
Okay, they were playing here a couple of years ago. When I say recently, it wasn't this year. They were playing here, and a local company was hired to transport them from A to B and provide close protection. So they had a driver who had a taxi license for limousines, which is required here in Ireland. Right? He was also close protection trained, so they said. Right? So they didn't have enough vehicles for the task because there was so many people, and they took a car as a how would you call it, test drive for the weekend, and put your man driving the licensed driver in an unregistered and unlicensed vehicle for public service transportation. A limousine or an executive vehicle in Ireland has to be public service vehicle registered, and the driver has to be public service vehicle license holder. Right? This is where close protection gets kiboshed in Ireland and London, by the way. It's the same. Right? So the police stopped the car in the middle of the night for some whatever reason, right? Asked for the guy's license, asked him what he was doing, asked for his license. He's given him his PSV license, and he checked the car out on his computer system. It's not registered as a public service vehicle. Guy arrested, car impounded, client standing on the side of the road at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So
it's not happy.
Not a happy camper. But this is again certification, insurance, right? So if you were the owner of that security company, and you're insured for this operation, what happens? You get sued by the client because he was left on the side of the road. That's your professional indemnity insurance, your public liability insurance, right? What's close protection? What's executive protection? What's hostile environment close protection all about in the long run? Insurance. Or assurances for the continuation of business covered by insurance. Assurance and insurance, 2 different things.
Right.
Yeah. When you look at the depth of what you're doing, it's not just protecting somebody physically. Actually, sometimes you physically putting your hands on somebody might be to your detriment and your client's detriment. Might be the worst thing you could possibly do for them and for you. Yeah. So there's so many levels to this game, Mike. It's I often equated do you remember the old Star Trek with Spock, and he's playing at this multi-tiered level of chess. Close protection protection industry is like that. it's multi-tiered, multi-leveled. And it's not just close protection, it's security, risk management, risk assessment, site surveys, capability and capacity assessments, and all sorts. But the entry level is doing a CP course with somebody somewhere that leads on to further employment, whether it's executive protection, residential security for a high net worth individual or an ultra high net worth individual, celebrity security for concerts and events, traveling on world tours. To me, that's not really close protection. That's more like travel safety and security management. Yeah, where you're moving with a group of people, and there might be 2 or 3 travel security consultants with that group. I've done that as well. I said to my daughter when she was a child, I'm bodyguard for the most famous person in the world, baby. She goes, who, Daddy? I said, Mickey Mouse. Because we were minding Disney and Ice, the Disney and Ice crew travelling around the place. So, you had Anna from Frozen and all that. Of course, at that time, she was mad about Frozen. She was singing the song Let It Go all the time. So I spent a month in Dubai and Qatar protecting those guys and running the security at the venue. So you from close protection, your skill set can expand and contract back. So it can expand out into management realms and contract back into operational close protection. Yeah, it's very, very. The one thing I'm going to say now about the UK side of things, because of the availability through resettlement payments from the British military for guys to get their CP license. I don't know if you experienced this when you were on your course. Guys were on what was called resettlement, and LCAS, enhanced learning credits system, was paying for their course, compared to the likes of you and me pay for it out of our own pocket. So there's a lot of very good British Army soldiers got their CP course paid for by the British government, and they went off working in Iraq. So the nature of the industry when you were working in it, where there was a high demand and not enough supply, changed once LCAS took over. Guys going like, after 4 years service, I'm getting out, I'm going to take my LCAS, do a CP course, and then deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan, and then spend the next 10 years in the sandpit working. And that turnover was continuous. Right? They got about 10 grand from the British military to pay for it. So at the moment there's 16,000 SIACP license holders. So when you're looking for a job, competition's going to be stiff. And who are they going to take first? First choice, British military trained, British security trained, SIA license holder. Yeah, we're going to take them before we take anybody else.
Right.
That's generally the way it is.
Yeah. Are those, you think those, how many of those 16,000 SIA license holders want to work overseas compared to those that want to work in
a lot
Britain?
of those 16,000 SIA license holders were the SIA CP course, and all SIA courses were used as a resolution to unemployment. So not every one of those SIA CP license holders are ex-military. Let's say there's 5,000 of those that are ex-military. And that's been generous, I think, right now, who have an SIA license. I know, could be, let's say 7, right? Who still have a valid SIA license in close protection, right? A lot of them are my and your age. So we're not going anywhere. Because the recruitment criteria for people,
you never know,
under 45, unless you're a manager, unless you're going out as a manager, you won't be from this year onwards, you won't be let into Iraq under 50, over 50, to work as a contractor, whether you're a manager or not.
Not seriously?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Crap.
So.
But I look so young.
Yeah. Handsome and charming like me. But unless you're a company owner or something, you won't be going in there as a manager or a contractor if you're 50 or over. Yeah. A lot of companies won't.
What's the reason for that?
Health reasons, diabetes, all that kind of stuff. And the Iraqi government brought in the criteria actually, because they didn't want fat old Western men in their 50s belasting their medical system. Yeah. For whatever reason, I'm not sure exactly, but I know for a fact that from this year onwards they won't be letting people under 50 or over 50 into the country. It might be under 55, but that's a push. Yeah. I know in the maritime security industry, when I got out in 2016, I felt pretty young. I was good at it, but the wages had gone. Last job I did was a month long for something like. But maritime security is a good bit easier than hostile environment. So the last job I did was like $150. That's per day, but I done it for 40 days. So when I came back, I had a wad of money, and that allowed me to survive for a while longer. But I, generically speaking, will not work for less than $350 a day here in Ireland. If it's for 4 hours or less, it's $250 a day. If it's over 12 hours, then it's extra $50 a day, or $50 an hour. And depending on the threat level, so threat level also increases price. That's why a lot of people, if you're smart and you're in the industry a long time and you ask to see the threat and risk assessment, to go on, I can't do it, you have to sign an NDA and all this. I say, yeah, sure, send it to me, I'll sign it. Oh no, you're taking the job. I'll tell you if I'm taking the job when I see the risk assessment and the threat assessment.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what my wages, what I'm looking for to do this job when I see the risk and threat assessment. Oh no, oh yeah, okay, grand, I'll send that to you. And then you never hear anything back from them. Do you know why? 9 times out of 10 they haven't got a threat assessment done or a risk assessment done, right? That's the small companies. Some of them don't even know how to do it, or didn't know they had to do that. And when you start asking them these questions, they're going, no, he knows too much. Right? I can't talk. So it's easier to hire the newly qualified guys who just done their CP course with whoever, right? Throw him on a job and let him pretend he's a bodyguard.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Even I've experienced that. And it's usually that someone gets, through some contacts, gets the job who has no idea of what he's doing really. And then he tries to find people to do the job for him. But he understands that if the client realizes that the people that work for you are smarter and know more than you, then they will hire him directly, and then they lose the job. So
that's it. But the one problem with that is you have a reputational problem then after that, don't you? As the individual who takes the contract off him, he's going to badmouth you. He's going to go, I gave him a job and he went to the client and took the job off me. You're better off saying, I'm finished this job this week. You have my contact details. When I'm out of this contract, call me. But not while I'm here. That type of thing. Right. Well, who are we to teach anybody how to suck eggs, you know? Right. It's kind of one of those. The industry can be. Another thing I want to say about the industry, Mike, I think you would agree with me, right? People come out of the military and go into close protection and think, it's going to be like in the army again or in the service. It's not. There's guys out there with big fucking knives. They're about that size. They're ready to stick them in your back when you're not looking. And every misstep you make, they'll twist and turn and play you like a little puppet, right? And then before you know it, you're being brought to the airport and saying, "Oh, thanks very much, but we're not bringing you back," just as you're getting on. These things happen, you know. Yeah,
things like that happen. Yeah, absolutely.
The other side is, as a team leader,
that's the whole security industry.
As a team leader, I've had the misfortune 3 times to do that. You know, and that's the horrible thing, because you're sending the guy home to the earache of the general with long hair, slapping him in the back of the head, going, "What kind of idiot are you?" Yeah, and it's hard because it's not nice to send a man who's got kids at home because he's incompetent, and to tell him like, "Okay, listen, buddy, you're better off just working for G4S doing static guard somewhere, and work your way up. Maybe get some education, do some management courses." Become a manager of a guarding company, but this isn't for you. You could be very security minded individual, Mike, just hostile or non-permissive or semi-permissive environments are not suited for a lot of people. You've seen that working in Chad and everywhere else. I have as well. I mean, I've stayed on a ship 5 months long. That's hard. That's really hard. It's hard psychologically. It's hard physically, because the food is not really nutritious, and that's why I hark back to what I said earlier on about coming off a task and spending a week eating steaks. That's because I needed that nourishment. My body was like,
okay.
boom, boom, boom.
That's understandable when you came off a ship.
Yeah. So but then you get into that cycle, which is awkward then after a while, because you get into the cycle of coming off a ship, eating a load, and then going back out, losing a ton of weight because the nutrition is shit and so on. So, like, you could end up in a Chinese fishing vessel with just rice and fish heads. I just eat the rice.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Not nice.
Yeah.
And again, that also requires a certain level of psychological fortitude or resilience, which over time can add incrementally becomes more and more hard. Even though you can deal with it, but you need time to recover from it, and you need time then when you get back to socialize again, because you become anti-socialized to a certain extent because you're not used to moving in normal civilian environment and social environments. So there's all these kind of things to consider. Anyway, sorry.
During your times, during the times when you're doing maritime security, did you ever have a contact where you guys actually needed to shoot at someone?
Yeah, I've had a few. I wouldn't say I've killed anybody. I've fired warning shots and
oh, really?
I might have dropped somebody. I don't know. There was a red mist. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. That sounds horrible. So one of the most I'm a lover of interesting jobs. So I will work for nearly nothing if it's interesting.
That's good.
Like Afghanistan, taking the guys to Afghanistan, that was interesting to me. The pay wasn't great in my mind, but it was at the end of it all, really, compared to what the guys were getting doing CP in Afghanistan at the time. But comparatively speaking, what my expectations were or what I wanted, it wasn't great. I done a really interesting maritime security task. My boss called me up. He says, "George, I have an interesting job, and I know you like interesting jobs." And I go, "Yes, Joe, I do." He says, "I want you to take a tugboat that goes 7 knots, which my granny can walk faster and she's dead." Okay. So 7 knots, right? Through the Indian Ocean. Okay, up along India. Crossed Oman, Yemen, up through Bab el-Mandeb into the Red Sea, all the way up to Suez. And I'm like, oh yeah, Joe, really? A tugboat? Are you off your fucking rocker? A tugboat? The freeboard in a tugboat is 1 meter. So a pirate just has to step on it. When the wave goes up, he just steps off. Right? He's like Captain Jack Sparrow walking onto the pier coming off the boat that's sinking.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, yeah, well, it's going to have a barge. It's going to be pushing a barge that'll have metallic, magnetic materials in the cargo hold. I'm like, okay. He says, I want you to do this as an exercise where you're doing a risk assessment and a security plan for future operations doing the same thing. I went, okay, that sounds cool. So I said, how many do I get in my team? Oh, you get 3. I said, no, I want 5. He goes, what? I want 5 guys on my team. Why? I said, I want 5 guys on my team because I want myself and my 2 IC to do 2 12-hour shifts, day and night, or 6 hours and 6 hours, and then the 3-man team to do 4 on, 8 off. So we're covering each other fairly well. And he's like, okay. So I planned out the roster and everything else. We got all the equipment they needed. We got all the steel plating and 14 mil steel. It's not going to hold for long, but it's going to hold for a while, you know. It'll let you get off a few rounds, especially against the 7.62. Won't do anything against an RPG. Like, you'll probably eat half the steel with an RPG, but anyway. So it's enough to give cover for fire. And so I set up the defenses of the whole vessel. I put up razor wire. I set up protocols and everything. It took me about 2 weeks to design the whole program of what we would need, because we tested everything. We pressure tested everything that we thought might work, and none of it fucking worked. Right? Until we decided, right, when we have an expanded security presence on the tugboat and the barge, it's impossible to protect the people. So as soon as there is a suspect vessel called on the target, we contract the team onto the pilot bridge and the pilot's tower, where we had steel plating put in, plus we had 3 locations on the deck with very strong steel plating for cover, which gave us 360 cover of the tugboat. We could release the barge, let that drift, so that's not then a hindrance to us, yeah. And then it would have allowed us to travel a little bit faster. But travel speed, at that speed on a tugboat's not going to travel very fast either way. And I mean, like, when you have a skiff that can go 25 knots, you know, going 7 knots, it'll just go around you like this, you know, for fun.
Yeah.
So we had suspect vessel approach from a mothership, what they call a mothership, in just off the coast of Oman, and fired some warning shots, and they buggered off. And as we come into Bab al-Mandeb, I had spoken to the captain the night before, and I told him which way I wanted him to go, the furthest way from Yemen as possible. There's kind of like 2 lines he could follow. Of course, he was so tired because he was doing 6 hours on, 6 hours off the whole time. Right, him and his second chief officer, they were doing 6 hours driving the boat, 6 hours on and off. Right, he was so tired that he went on inland along the coast of Yemen, and I get called by my guys and going, and I had 1 Irish guy, 1 Ukrainian Spetsnaz guy, and 3 Sri Lankan guys. And the Sri Lankan guy came down to me. One of the guys, he was a really good operator, had fought in the Sri Lankan war against Tamil Tigers, and he's a information technology and intelligence guy, but handy as fuck with a gun as well, because we've done some shooting. Like, we had plenty of rounds to do some target boats. You throw a few boxes out into the sea and just do ping ping ping, you know, yourself. Right. He goes, George, you need to come up. And I go up, the next thing I just see all these little fisherman skiffs sharking the barge and our tugboat, and we're only going 7 knots. Like, I mean, they could literally come up and stand on the deck and walk on, like. So I called everybody, I got everybody up, all of us, and we were followed for like 14 hours, right, by vessels that were doing they were doing leapfrog, and then some vessels were sharking us the whole time as well. So that was really like hair on the back of your neck. And at one stage, like, there was a skiff coming right, say that's our barge, our tugboat. There's a skiff coming right at midship. So I dropped 2 rounds into the water, dropped 2 rounds into the hull of the vessel, and then this guy stood up and go, no please, and I could hear him, no please. Yeah. So that was one experience. And I had a similar one as well on another vessel. It wouldn't have been as harsh, but I wouldn't be the only guy to say that we've had to fire warning shots at suspect vessels approaching our vessel and stand there with our guns in our hand. And if they get closer and the main point of impact with our vessel is midship, we have to take further steps, because under rules of use of force, we have the right and means of self-defense. So some masters of vessels would say, when I tell you not to shoot anymore, you stop. My answer would always be, you can tell me what you want, it doesn't mean I'm going to do it. In that instance, because George is not going for a holiday in Somalia.
Now you're too light skinned. That would
burnt
be
to a crisp.
End badly. Sunburns, I mean, you know. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm just always wondering if, like, for example, I know those stories, like, you know, some pirates or whatever you want to call them come up, and they basically want to see if there's any resistance or not. And if they encounter resistance, they're like, oh, no, let's go find
that
someone
happens
else.
Mostly.
Right?
That's it.
But I don't really.
That's what happens mostly.
I don't really know anybody who has a story where they like actually tried to, well, either at least fired. Well, they got shot at like massively.
I've had that 4 or 5 times in the 5
people
years.
actually tried to enter the boat.
No, I've never had anybody get near enough to get on the boat, but I've had people do vessel approaches to test to see if we're armed. And our rules of use of force are simple. Once we see a suspect vessel, the bridge officer will tell us there's something on the radar. We go, okay, what's their CPA, but there's their main point of impact on the vessel, and they give us a location on the vessel. We go, well, that's not good because they're coming to board the vessel. You know by what you're looking at after a while. You get experienced at it, right? So you go out day or night, stand out there. If it's nighttime, you make an announcement over the foghorn. You give them all the necessary warnings possible. All right. You might even fire off flares. Yeah. But generally in the daytime, because they don't like to attack a vessel when the sea is rough. They do like to attack a vessel pre-dawn and at dawn and dusk and dawn. That's when they generally like to do it, because they understand the nature of human beings. They're getting tired at those times of the day. And in the Indian Ocean, the day is split down the middle, 12 hours almost, because you're near the equator, right? So it can go from bright to dark like that, right? And you won't see stars in the Indian Ocean for 2 hours after it turns dark. It takes a while for the stars to come out.
Oh.
Right? So they can turn up at your vessel, try and climb aboard. You'll pick them up on radar unless it's really bad waves. They don't like to attack vessels in bad waves no more than I would, because I get seasick as it is and when it's like that. Right? Imagine trying to attack when there's gale force and the sea state is like at level 4 where you're like this all the time, up and down.
Right.
No, but you can't even get a hook on a ship, right? You have to attack a vessel or board a vessel when it's calm. Unless you have really high level specialized kit, right? SAS, SBS, whatever special forces unit you want to name, that they use for boarding a vessel, it's going to be really hard, right? So when you get a vessel doing suspect approach, you stand out there and you just stand up there, hold your weapon up. They see that. They can see the silhouette. They know you're armed. They might stop. They might decide to keep pushing it. You might fire a couple of warning shots into the air. Yeah. If they can hear you at the distance they're at, they'll stop. If they can't, because the wind is in their ears, they're coming at your vessel, and you drop a few rounds in the water, right? If they see the splash, they might stop and go, no, please, right? If they can't see the splash and they don't hear the sound of the round, they'll keep coming. Yeah. And then what happens is, I'm generous. I'll fire 2 more rounds into the water and they'll cut off at the last minute. Every bloody time. They'll test and test and test. They'll push right up until the edge. Right? Every time I've had it, they've tried. 9 times out of 10 though, what I will say is, vessels coming after your vessel when you're in certain areas in the Indian Ocean, they're not coming to attack you. They're looking to get the fish that are riled up in the wake of your vessel. They're fishermen, so you have to be really careful. Give you an example. 2 Indian soldiers, 2 Indian Marine commandos were deployed to work on a Indian vessel traveling through the Indian Ocean, and I don't know if anybody remembers this, but some guys from, Italy, 2 Italian guys, right? They were on an Italian vessel sailing along the coast of India, and some artisanal fishermen were out in the Indian Ocean fishing about 60 miles off the coast of India, and they didn't get out of the way, and the vessel they were on sailed through the net that they had out. Of course, these Indian guys have guns as well, because they need guns to protect themselves against pirates and criminals at sea, people trying to rob them and their catch. And they fired a few shots, so the Italian guys thought they were under attack because they weren't properly briefed and they overreacted. And they killed maybe injured one and killed another one, or killed both. I'm not sure, but that was 2010 or something. But that vessel was arrested and brought into port in India, even though it was in 60 miles off the coast. It was an Italian vessel under the protection of Italian military. That vessel was arrested by the Indian government, and those 2 soldiers were put into jail in India. You would think now, out in international waters, 60 miles off the coast of India, following their rules of use of force, that there would be no issues. But the Indian Navy brought that vessel into port and arrested the crew and arrested those guys. They spent a long time in jail and then a long time in and out of the Italian embassy. So where things are kind of grey, there's a lot of room for mistakes as well as profit. Yeah.
And that's at sea. Right? Now there's a lot of countries where you're constantly working under the eyes of the governmental security forces, let's say. So if you screw up anything in there, and you're not, for some reason, like in Iraq, protected by whoever's in charge in the country, then it's what happened in Afghanistan. When last time I was there was in 2011, and they had already changed the rules that you could only be a consultant and not a PSD guy anymore, unless you were on an embassy contract. And the main thing we always fought against or tried to fix was have permits for everything. You needed a permit for the car, you needed a permit for your radio, you needed a permit for your weapon. The problem was all these were not set up to actually give you those permanent permits, so they kind of like wiggled it and they gave you exemptions. The problem is the exemptions were only good for a week or two. And for those 3 exemptions, you had to go to 3 different places and always had to pay a fee, of course, right?
Yeah,
how it is.
No, it was a fee.
So your biggest problem was getting caught in a checkpoint and missing one of those forms, or having it being out of date. And they would arrest you, confiscate the car, confiscate all your stuff, and throw you in an Afghan prison. Until your company, hopefully had someone they could call to get you out again.
You think of all the guys who were trained to shoot.
That's one of the sides of the contracting.
Think about this for a second, Mike. Right? Think of all the guys who went on their high-level Gucci bodyguard course and they were told to shoot the police through the doors because of that shit. How many of those guys actually did that? How many ended up in jail? Do you get me? Because that became a part of training doctrine and tactic, techniques and procedures. Don't trust the checkpoint. Don't trust the people running the checkpoint. You have that experience yourself from one of your first deployments in Iraq, being on a dodgy checkpoint and getting locked up, and exchanging rounds with the local police. As a friend of mine said to me at one stage, he says that's why nobody went up there. Anytime we were stopped by him, he killed them. On that checkpoint, because I mentioned that to him. He says, that's why we killed them, because we knew what they were. Yeah. And that's probably the guy. They were probably the very same guys that went there the week before before you were there.
It could be, you never know. But the thing is, you can't really shoot out of the doors if they are armored.
They were in soft skins, generally speaking, scooting around trying to look as local as possible, I think. And that's another thing. If you're looking at your those
kind of people. I see.
Yeah. And they knew who they were dealing with.
For them, yeah.
It was easy. I said that to him. I said it's very easy to say that in hindsight, especially who you were working for. And he goes, yeah, it is. But he says, everybody knew, so that's what everybody did. And he said to me, yeah, your bosses probably knew as well, and they just failed to pass that information on to you.
No, they didn't fail. They deliberately didn't pass the information because they actually lied to us.
That was my buddy's being nice about it when he was saying they just failed to pass the information on.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. They probably
in satire. Yeah, ironically, they didn't tell you.
Yeah.
But it's similar in the sense when you're working in maritime security, because sometimes you could get vessels coming pretty close to you. When you're on the bridge ring and you're watching them like a hawk, because on the other side of the blind side of the vessel they could have a load of skiffs that could just scoot out around, come over and attack you. So they test the waters. I call it sharking. Have you ever been mugged by 3 guys? Or pickpocket, right? You'll see pickpockets. If you take high ground in some main city, the high ground in some main city or a shopping centre and just watch that foyer area, you'll start to pick out who the pickpockets are. And they work as a team, maybe 3 or 4 of them, and they're sharking their victims the whole time. And it's the same at sea. Human nature doesn't change, patterns of life don't change, and the environment changes, the obstacles change, but what people do in precursors to attack or pre-contact indicators, they don't really change. Just maybe the modus operandi of movement. It does like car, boat, whatever, scooter, bike. See, in London, for example, as a bodyguard, everybody is protecting their principals now because they're wearing Rolexes. Yeah, and they're getting robbed. Some people wear 2 Rolexes. You know, how stupid do you have to be?
Yeah.
You know, but hey, that's another thing too. I'd like to address, if you don't mind, working in London. If you ever do get a chance to work in London, great.
Sure.
But the average person is paid £180 sterling for static guard, for residential security. That's like €200 for 12-hour shift.
It's not a lot. I know.
And to be cognizant that the UK is an unarmed environment. You'll never be armed. Yeah. So then when you're doing executive protection, knowing how much the corporate entities pay per day to the companies that subcontract to your company, a lot of it is downhill subcontracting. So company A gets the contract, the subcontract to B, then C, then D. By the time it gets to you at E, it's £180 a day or €180 a day, and you're looking at pennies, and you still have to pay tax on that.
Yeah,
because you're working 90% of the time in close protection. You're working as self-employed unless you get really lucky and you become part of an in-house security team for an ultra high net worth family, and that's a permanent position. But what's the rule in security, Mike? There's no security in security.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say everything changes.
Life is
the only secure thing is das einzig sichere ist die Veränderung.
The only real true secure thing that is change. Yeah. Life is change. It always is, every day, but somehow still manages to remain the same somewhere along the line.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to end it for today. I thought that was some very interesting stories that I actually have not heard from you before. So thanks for that.
I don't tell many stories these days. I think.
Just for no, yeah, well, that's because you don't drink anymore.
I drink a little bit, but I don't. I never drink it before I'm working, and I might have a couple of beers twice a year, maybe. You know, that's it. There has to be some ballast release somewhere at some stage. You know, get away from everybody, have a couple of beers with the guys, and that's it. Have a bit of a party like the old days, but.
Everything is good in moderation.
Moderation. Once a year is enough for me. I can't get over the hangovers anymore.
Well.
They kill me.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. All right, George, man. Thank you again very much. I think it was very helpful for a lot of guys that always ask me the questions, and now they see how complicated everything is.
Do they make it more complicated, or they just explain the complications? I don't know. Try to help.
No. Actually, I think it helped. It helped me to understand what's important and what not, and I think everybody else sees that you need to, like, if you really want the job or a job like that, then you have to be able to improvise. Yeah, maybe not go the straight route like you did. Be a bricklayer in Afghanistan to get that on your CV, then come back, and then eventually you'll end up in a good place if you keep at it.
Here's a question for everybody to think about. What is your lifespan in executive protection or close protection in hostile environments? How long do you think you have to do a good job, make an impact, advance, and then leave with a clean slate and the potential of a second career? Because it's like a 5 to 10 year span, depending on your age. Because you're not going to be a member of a CP team for 10 years. You're going to get pissed off after 2 at the latest.
Yeah, most likely not.
Yeah, you want to be doing other things. You're going to go other places, so you have to decide how long do you want to do that for. And what I would say is, go back to again what I said earlier on. If you can get into the German military and join Feldjäger and go to Personenschutzabteilung, or you go to Bundesgrenzschutz, and you go to their international Bundesgrenzschutzamt oder sowas, is their bodyguard teams, and you have to be under a certain age. I think you have to be under 30 or something. I don't know, 34, right? If you go to those two government agencies and get your training with them, and you have a career with them, when you come out, you're cream of the crop. You're top of the heap. On top of all that, then do some further education, get some diplomas or degrees or whatever. Because if you want to stay in the security industry and stay relevant, you have to. If you just want to be a dinosaur like me or you, yeah. But I have some education. You have a degree in psychology. I don't know. Do you even have a master's degree? I think. Yeah. So you have a master's degree in psychology.
I have. Yeah.
You're not Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung. You know, nobody wants to be Freud anyway. But you can develop yourself further and become a clinical psychologist if you so thought you could or wanted to, right?
Oh,
yeah,
God,
see, there you go, right? But I went to university for a year and I came out, and since then I've been doing short professional courses because that suits my mindset, and the level of intensity that's required to do them is like I can do that in 4 weeks and smash it out, and I can write good assignments and do all the stuff I need to do and then move on, right? I know a 4-year degree for me is probably I'd do it, but I get bored, I'll be honest. I think I have a touch of ADHD. Shh, don't tell anyone.
No, I don't have to. You just did. No, man, George, I hope we can talk again soon. If not on a podcast, then in private.
Sure, bro. No, you know I'm always on the end of a phone.
Yeah,
mic, so.
Thanks again, and then I'll let you go for the day. And then let's talk a couple of more minutes before I have to go to bed. See you guys.
Bye-bye.